Have you ever made a choice that changed everything? A simple turn of the wheel, a decision made in a split second, that sends your life careening down a path you never could have imagined. This is a story about a night like that, a night of relentless rain, a deserted highway, and a discovery that would unravel a conspiracy of greed and betrayal. It's a story about how the most unassuming person can find the courage to fight for what's right, even when the whole world seems to be against them. Prepare yourself for a journey into the heart of a city's secrets, where one woman's compassion becomes her greatest weapon and her most terrifying liability. Our story begins with Maya. At 24, she was navigating the harsh realities of life in Crestview, a city that promised dreams but often delivered sleepless nights. Raised in a small town by her mechanic grandfather, Maya had grease under her fingernails and a fierce independence in her heart. She came to the city for a fresh start, fell in love with a charming real estate agent named Ethan, and believed her future was set. But when she told him she was pregnant, his promises evaporated. He vanished, leaving her with a broken heart, a tiny apartment, and the growing responsibility of a child on the way. To survive, she leased a sedan from a fleet owner and became a rideshare driver, chasing fares at all hours. Every dollar was a small victory, a step towards building a life for her unborn child, alone. She was a survivor, tough and resilient, but she was about to face a challenge far greater than any late-night fare or overdue bill. The wipers fought a losing battle against the deluge. Rain hammered the windshield of Maya's sedan, turning the world outside into a distorted watercolour of bleeding streetlights. It was almost 2 a.m, and the fatigue was a heavy blanket threatening to suffocate her. Her back ached, a dull, persistent pain that had become her constant companion in the 3rd trimester. A wave of nausea, another unwelcome guest, rose in her throat. She just wanted this shift to be over. As she navigated the slick asphalt of the old county highway, a lonely stretch of road connecting the city to the forgotten towns beyond, her headlights sliced through the darkness and caught something. A shape. A man, stumbling out from the dense, dripping woods, collapsing onto the shoulder of the road. Her heart leapt into her throat. Her first instinct, honed by months of driving strangers through the city's underbelly, was to speed up, lock the doors, and not look back. It was dangerous. But then the man moved, a pathetic, desperate crawl. He wasn't a threat. He was a victim. Maya's foot hovered over the accelerator, her mind racing. Every self-preservation instinct screamed at her to drive on. A pregnant woman alone on a deserted road in a storm. It was the beginning of a horror movie, but her grandfather's voice echoed in her memory. "You don't leave a person stranded, May. Not ever." The man on the ground was barely visible now, a heap of dark, wet clothing. She couldn't just leave him there to die. With a deep, shuddering breath that did little to calm her pounding heart, she pulled the car over, the tyres crunching on the gravel shoulder. She flicked on her hazard lights, their rhythmic amber flashes painting the rain-streaked interior. She fumbled for her phone, her thumb hesitating over the 911 icon. What would she even say? Before she could decide, she grabbed a heavy-duty flashlight from the glove compartment, took one last look at the empty road behind her, and pushed the door open, stepping out into the cold, chaotic storm. The wind and rain hit her like a physical blow, plastering her thin hoodie to her skin. In an instant, the air smelled of wet earth and pine. "Hey, sir! Are you okay?" she shouted, her voice nearly swallowed by the storm. She approached cautiously, the flashlight beam cutting a shaky path through the downpour. As she got closer, the grim reality of the situation became clear. He was a mess of mud and torn fabric. His face was a mask of drying blood and fresh cuts, his knuckles raw and swollen. He looked up, his eyes unfocused and clouded with pain. He smelled of rain and fear, not alcohol. "Help! Please!" he rasped, his voice a dry whisper that was barely audible over the roar of the wind. Then his eyes rolled back in his head, and he went limp. Maya's breath hitched. She was alone with an unconscious, injured stranger. The responsible thing was to call an ambulance. But looking at him, so battered and vulnerable, she knew he needed help now. With a surge of adrenaline, she decided she would take him to the hospital herself. Getting him into the car was a monumental struggle. He was heavier than he looked, a dead weight that tested every ounce of her strength. She grunted and strained, her muscles screaming in protest, her baby bump an awkward obstacle. Finally, she managed to get him into the back seat, his muddy head lolling against the clean upholstery. She slammed the door, soaked and shivering, and scrambled back into the driver's seat. Her hands trembled as she gripped the steering wheel. The interior of the car, once her safe cocoon, now felt tense and violated. It reeked of damp clothes and the metallic tang of blood. She drove with a desperate urgency, her eyes darting between the treacherous road and the man's still form in her rearview mirror. At Crestview, General's emergency entrance, she half carried, half dragged him inside, shouting for help. Medics rushed forward, and he was swallowed by the sterile chaos of the hospital. Maya was left standing in the harsh fluorescent light, dripping onto the linoleum, her heart still hammering against her ribs. The next morning, the storm had passed, leaving behind a city washed clean, but Maya's mind was still turbulent. She had spent hours cleaning the mud and faint bloodstains from her back seat, the scent of antiseptic cleaner failing to erase the memory of the night. When she arrived at the fleet garage to report in, her boss, Mr. Henderson, was waiting. He was a man whose smile never reached his cold, calculating eyes. "Maya," a word, he said, gesturing to his cramped office. He pointed to a tablet displaying her car's GPS data. "You were off route for nearly 2 hours last night, and you ended your shift early. Care to explain this detour to Crestview General?" His tone was deceptively calm, the kind he used before levying a fine. The car was his property, and any unauthorized use was a breach of her lease agreement. She had known this call was coming, but the pit in her stomach tightened anyway. Every dollar mattered, and Henderson was notorious for docking pay for the slightest infraction. Maya took a steadying breath, trying to keep her voice even. "There was an emergency, Mr. Henderson. I found a man on the side of Highway 12. He was badly hurt. I had to take him to the hospital." Henderson leaned back in his squeaky chair, steepling his fingers. He looked at her, not with concern, but with profound annoyance. "An emergency," he repeated flatly. "So you decided to turn my 4-door sedan, my business asset, into an unofficial ambulance? Do you have any idea what that does to the resale value, Maya? The liability? What if this vagrant had expired in my vehicle?" He spoke the word vagrant with a sneer. Maya's hands clenched into fists. "He wasn't a vagrant. He was a person who needed help. I couldn't just leave him there." Henderson scoffed, a dry, humourless sound. "Your compassion is going to be the end of you, and it's certainly not profitable for me. The cost of a full interior detailing is coming out of your weekly pay. Don't let it happen again." He dismissed her with a wave of his hand, already turning back to his screen. Later that day, feeling dejected and worried about her dwindling finances, Maya received a call from an unknown number. A polished, professional voice on the other end introduced himself as an assistant to a Mr. Frederick Thorne. The name meant nothing to her. The voice explained that Mr. Thorne was the father of the young man she had rescued, and he wished to thank her personally. Could he stop by her apartment? Maya was hesitant, a knot of unease tightening in her stomach. How did they get her name and number? The hospital must have given it to them. Despite her misgivings, she agreed. An hour later, a sleek black town car, the kind that whispered of old money and power, pulled up outside her modest apartment building. A man in a tailored suit with silver hair and a face that looked like it had been carved from granite stepped out. This was Frederick Thorne. He was flanked by 2 other men in dark suits who scanned the surroundings with unnerving intensity. Frederick Thorne entered her small living room without being invited, his expensive leather shoes silent on her worn rug. He surveyed the room with a quick, dismissive glance, his eyes lingering for a moment on the stack of baby books on her coffee table. "Miss Miller, thank you for seeing me," he began, his voice a low, smooth baritone. "You saved my son's life last night. Leo, he's a bit of a wanderer. Got himself into some trouble. We are all incredibly grateful for your timely intervention." He spoke of his son with a strange detachment, as if discussing a problematic investment. There was no warmth, no fatherly concern in his voice. Maya felt a prickle of suspicion. Is Leo okay?" she asked. Thorn gave a thin, reassuring smile. "He's resting comfortably. The doctors are taking excellent care of him." He then reached into his jacket and pulled out a thick white envelope, placing it on the coffee table. "A small token of our family's gratitude for your trouble and any inconvenience." Maya stared at the envelope. It was bulging with cash. Her rent was due, and the charge from Henderson for the car cleaning was a heavy blow. This money would solve so many problems. But something felt profoundly wrong. It felt less like a thank you and more like a transaction, a payment for services rendered. That's not necessary," she stammered. "I just did what anyone would have done." Thorn's smile didn't waver. "Please, I insist. Also, I must ask, on the way to the hospital, did my son say anything to you? About where he'd been or who he was with? He was quite disoriented, I imagine." The question was casual, but his eyes were sharp, searching. The detached tone was gone, replaced by a keen, almost predatory interest. Suddenly, Maya understood. This wasn't just about gratitude. He was fishing for information. "No," she said, her voice firmer than she expected. "He was unconscious most of the time. He just told me his name was Leo. That's all." Thorn's expression relaxed, a flicker of relief in his cold eyes. "Excellent! Well, we won't take up any more of your time." After Thorn and his men departed, leaving the scent of expensive cologne and an unnerving silence in their wake, Maya sank onto her couch. The envelope lay on the table, a silent testament to the bizarre encounter. She opened it. It was filled with $100 bills, more money than she'd seen in one place in her entire life, enough to cover her rent for a year, enough to buy everything she needed for the baby. But the relief she should have felt was absent, replaced by a growing dread. Thorn's questions echoed in her mind. Why was he so concerned about what Leo might have said? And why did he seem so relieved when she said Leo had told her nothing? It felt like he was buying her silence, not thanking her for her help. She clutched her stomach, a protective instinct flaring up. She had stumbled into something far more complex and dangerous than a simple mugging on a deserted highway. The next day, unable to shake the feeling of unease, Maya decided to go back to the hospital. She told herself she just wanted to check on Leo, to make sure he was really okay. She bought a small bouquet of flowers from a corner store, the cheerful yellow daisies a stark contrast to her anxious mood. At the information desk at Crestview General, she asked for Leo Thorne's room number. The receptionist typed his name into the computer, her brow furrowing. "I'm sorry, but Mr. Thorne is not receiving any visitors at this time. Family only." Maya's heart sank. "But his father came to see me yesterday. He said Leo was doing well. I'm the one who brought him in. Can't I just see him for a minute?" The receptionist offered a polite but firm smile. "I'm sorry, ma'am. My instructions are very clear. No visitors." Maya felt a chill that had nothing to do with the hospital's air conditioning. Something was wrong. This wasn't normal hospital procedure. Frustrated and more suspicious than ever, Maya was about to leave when a young nurse in blue scrubs hurried past, then stopped and turned back. "You're the one who brought in the John Doe from the highway, right?" she asked in a low voice. Maya nodded. "His name is Leo. I was just trying to see him." The nurse's eyes darted down the empty hallway. "Listen, I can't talk here. Meet me in the cafeteria in 10 minutes. My name is Sarah." The nurse gave her a meaningful look and then disappeared around a corner. In the bustling cafeteria, surrounded by the clatter of trays and the low hum of conversation, Sarah slid into the booth opposite Maya. She looked nervous. "You need to be careful," Sarah began, her voice barely a whisper. "The man you brought in, he's not just recovering. They've got him in a private room in the ICU, heavily sedated. The official chart says he's in a medically induced coma due to a severe concussion, But it doesn't add up. His initial scans weren't that bad. Maya stared at Sarah, her mind struggling to process the information. What are you saying? Why would they do that? Sarah leaned closer, her expression grim. I'm saying that man who calls himself his father, Frederick Thorne, he's not acting like a concerned parent, he's acting like a jailer. He had a very private meeting with our chief of medicine, Dr. Evans, right after he arrived. And I heard rumours, big rumours, that Thorne just made a very generous donation to the hospital's new surgical wing. People are saying Thorne wants Leo kept quiet and out of the way, and Dr. Evans is making sure it happens. It's wrong what they're doing. That young man isn't in a coma. He's a prisoner in his own body. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. The cash, the strange questions, the visitor restrictions. It was a cover-up. Thorne wasn't protecting his son. He was controlling him. And Maya was the only one who knew how it all started. Maya drove home in a daze, Sarah's words replaying in her head. A prisoner in his own body. The phrase sent a shiver down her spine. She was in over her head. This was a world of powerful men and dirty money, a world she had no business being in. The smart thing to do would be to walk away, to take the cash, and forget she ever saw a man on the side of the road. She had her own baby to think about, her own future to protect. Getting involved could put them both in danger. She spent the night tossing and turning, her dreams filled with images of Leo's battered face and Thorne's cold, predatory eyes. By morning, her fear had solidified into a hard knot of resolve. She couldn't walk away. She couldn't live with herself knowing that a man was being slowly erased from the world, all because she was too scared to act. She had started this. She had to find a way to finish it. Her first thought was the police, but she quickly dismissed it. Who would they believe? A pregnant, struggling rideshare driver? Or Frederick Thorne, one of the city's most powerful and influential men? Thorne could buy the best lawyers, spin any story he wanted. He had already bought a hospital's chief of medicine. Her word against his would be meaningless. She needed proof, or she needed to get Leo out of there. There was only one person who might be willing to help her. She called Sarah. They met again, this time at a quiet coffee shop, far from the hospital. Maya laid out her desperate, half-formed idea. I want to get him out, Sarah. We have to get him out of there. Sarah's eyes widened in disbelief. Are you crazy? That's kidnapping. We could go to jail for years. I'd lose my nursing license. Everything I've worked for. Maya leaned forward, her voice low and intense. And what about him? What happens if we do nothing? Thorne will keep him drugged until what? Until he gets whatever he wants? This is Leo's only chance. Sarah wrestled with the choice, her face pale with conflict. She was a good person, a rule follower. What Maya was suggesting was insane, reckless and illegal. But she had also taken an oath to do no harm, and she knew in her gut that harm was being done to Leo Thorne every minute he spent in that hospital bed. The image of the powerful man and the cowed doctor flashed in her mind. The system wasn't protecting Leo. It was enabling his abuser. Okay, Sarah finally whispered, her voice trembling slightly. Okay, I'll help you. But we have to be smart about this. We get one shot. A wave of relief washed over Maya, so potent it almost made her dizzy. She wasn't alone in this anymore. Together, they began to sketch out a plan on a napkin, their hushed voices filled with a mixture of terror and determination. The plan was risky, with 100 things that could go wrong, but it was better than doing nothing at all. The plan was set for 2 nights later, during Sarah's late shift. The hours leading up to it were the longest of Maya's life. Every passing police car made her jump. Every unknown phone call made her heart pound. On the designated night, she parked her car in a dark alley behind the hospital, near the laundry service entrance where the security cameras were known to be faulty. Her hands were slick with sweat on the steering wheel. She changed it to a set of scrubs Sarah had smuggled out for her, pulling a surgical mask over her face and a cap over her hair. She looked in the rearview mirror and saw a stranger, her eyes wide with fear above the pale blue mask. She took a deep breath, clutching the fake hospital ID Sarah had made for her. It was flimsy, But in the dim light of the back corridors, it might just work. It had to work. She got out of the car and slipped through the service door, her heart hammering like a drum. The hospital was a different world at night. The corridors were dimly lit and eerily quiet, the silence broken only by the distant hum of machinery and the squeak of her own rubber-soled shoes on the polished floor. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat. Every distant sound made her flinch. Sarah was waiting for her near the ICU, her expression tense. "He's ready," she whispered. "I skipped his last dose of sedative. He's groggy, but he should be rousable. We'll use a wheelchair. We'll say we're taking him for a late-night CT scan." They moved with practiced efficiency. Inside the room, Leo was a still form under a white sheet, an IV line snaking into his arm. Together, they disconnected the monitors and carefully moved him into the wheelchair. He moaned softly but didn't wake. Sarah draped a blanket over him, covering him almost completely. Pushing the wheelchair down the empty hall felt like a tightrope walk over a canyon. Maya's entire body was coiled with tension, expecting a shout, an alarm, a hand on her shoulder at any second. They made it to the service elevator, their luck holding. The ride down was agonizingly slow, the silence thick with unspoken fear. As they wheeled him out the back door, into the cool, damp air of the alley, Maya felt a surge of triumph. They had done it. They were out. They carefully maneuvered Leo into the back seat of her car. He was beginning to stir, mumbling incoherently. "The bag," Sarah said, pressing a small duffel into Maya's hands. "It has some saline drips and basic supplies to help with the withdrawal from the sedatives. Instructions are inside." She looked at Maya, her eyes full of worry. "Good luck, Maya. Be careful." Then she was gone, melting back into the shadows of the hospital. Maya got into the driver's seat, her hands shaking so badly she could barely fit the key in the ignition. She pulled out of the alley, not daring to look back, and drove into the sleeping city, a fugitive with precious, unconscious cargo. Getting Leo up the 2 flights of stairs to her apartment was an ordeal. He was conscious enough to stumble, but too weak to support his own weight. She half-dragged, half-carried him, her own body screaming with exhaustion. She finally got him onto her pull-out couch, where he promptly collapsed into a deep, troubled sleep. Maya locked and bolted her door, her sense of triumph replaced by the stark reality of her situation. A man who was supposed to be in an ICU was now asleep on her sofa. A powerful, dangerous man was looking for him, and she was a pregnant woman, completely alone, in the middle of it all. The weight of her decision crashed down on her. What had she done? She sank into a chair, watching the slow rise and fall of Leo's chest, and for the first time since this whole nightmare began, she allowed herself to cry, silent tears of fear and exhaustion streaming down her face. Leo drifted in and out of consciousness for the next 24 hours. Maya followed Sarah's instructions, keeping him hydrated and comfortable. She barely slept watching him, listening at the door for any unusual sounds. She called her boss, Mr. Henderson, and told him she had the flu, that she couldn't drive for a few days. He grumbled but agreed. Her meagre savings were dwindling fast. On the second morning, she was sitting by the window when she heard a groan from the couch. Leo's eyes were open. He was looking around the room, his expression a mixture of confusion and pain. Where am I?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "Am I dead?" Maya moved toward him slowly. "No, you're not dead. You're in my apartment. My name is Maya. I'm the one who found you on the highway." Recognition flickered in his eyes. "The rideshare driver," he whispered. He tried to sit up, wincing in pain. "The hospital. My uncle. What happened?" Maya sat down on the edge of the coffee table, keeping a safe distance. She explained everything, her voice calm and steady as she recounted the story, the visit from his uncle, Frederick Thorne, the envelope of cash, the block visits at the hospital, and the conversation with the nurse, Sarah. She told him about their escape, watching his face for a reaction. As she spoke, the confusion in his eyes was replaced by a dawning horror, and then a cold, hard anger. He listened without interrupting, his jaw tight. When she finished, a long silence filled the small room. He stared at the cracked ceiling, the reality of his uncle's betrayal sinking in. "I should have known," he finally said, his voice laced with bitterness. "I should have seen it coming." He looked at her then, his gaze intense. He was trying to neutralize me, to keep me incapacitated until after my birthday. He paused. "My 23rd birthday is in 5 days. He began to tell her his story, the words spilling out as if a dam had broken. His parents, visionary entrepreneurs who had built a hotel empire, had died in a suspicious private plane crash when he was just a child. His uncle, Frederick Thorne, his father's younger, less successful brother, had become his legal guardian and the trustee of his massive inheritance. The will was clear. Leo would gain full control of the entire Vance Corporation on his 23rd birthday. For years, Frederick had been a distant, controlling guardian, sending Leo away to boarding schools and keeping him at arm's length from the family business. Leo had recently returned to Crestview, determined to claim his birthright and investigate the true circumstances of his parents' death, which he had always suspected was no accident. He had started asking questions, and he had uncovered evidence that his uncle had been systematically embezzling from the company for years. That was when he was ambushed, drugged, and taken. "They held me in some old cabin in the woods," Leo continued, his voice low. "They wanted me to sign documents, to transfer control of the trust to my uncle. I refused. I managed to escape one night, ran for miles until I collapsed. That's when you found me." He looked around Maya's small, tidy apartment, a space that could fit inside the master bathroom of his family home. He looked at her, at the gentle swell of her stomach, at the exhaustion and fear that still lingered in her eyes. "You risked everything for me," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "A complete stranger. Why?" Maya shrugged, looking down at her hands. "I don't know. Because it was the right thing to do, I guess. Because no one else was going to." The simplicity of her answer seemed to floor him. He knew then that this woman possessed a strength and integrity that his uncle, with all his wealth and power, could never comprehend. They knew they couldn't hide forever. Frederick would be turning the city upside down looking for him. The hospital would have reported him missing. They needed a new plan. "We can't go to the city police," Leo said. "Frederick has half the department on his payroll, but there's one person he can't control, the district attorney, Ellen Brady. She's tough, independent, and she has a reputation for taking on the rich and powerful. My father supported her first campaign. She might listen." It was a long shot, but it was their only shot. They spent the next day preparing. Leo, though still weak, dictated every detail he could remember. Names, dates, account numbers he had seen. Maya wrote it all down, her hand flying across a legal pad. They were a team, united by a shared threat and a desperate hope for justice. The small apartment, once a symbol of Maya's lonely struggle, had become a war room, the staging ground for a battle against one of the most powerful men in the city. Getting to the DA's office was a risk. They had to assume Frederick's men were everywhere. Maya called her friend and fellow driver, Frank, a kind, middle-aged family man she trusted. She didn't tell him everything, just that she was helping someone in serious trouble and needed a discreet ride. Frank arrived, his face etched with worry, and asked no questions when he saw the pale, bruised man with Maya. He drove them through back streets, his eyes constantly checking the rearview mirror. The entire ride was fraught with tension. Maya kept a hand on her belly, a silent prayer on her lips. At the courthouse, they slipped in through a side entrance. Leo, leaning on Maya for support, felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it. They asked to see DA Brady, claiming they had urgent information regarding a potential crime. After a tense wait, they were ushered into her office. Ellen Brady was a sharp, no-nonsense woman, with intelligent eyes that seemed to see right through you. Leo told his story again, this time with Maya by his side, occasionally adding details about the hospital and the escape. A. Brady listened intently, her expression unreadable. She asked sharp, probing questions, testing the details, searching for inconsistencies. Maya presented the notes she had taken, the timeline, everything. When they finished, Brady was silent for a long moment, tapping a pen on her desk. Mr. Thorne is a very influential man, with a team of very expensive lawyers, she said finally. But this story, and the evidence from the nurse you mentioned, it's compelling. And frankly, I've had my eye on Thorne's business dealings for a while. She stood up, her decision made. I'm placing you in protective custody, Mr. Vance. Both of you. We're going to open an immediate investigation. Let's see how Mr. Thorne likes answering questions under oath. For the first time in days, Maya felt a fragile glimmer of hope. They had found an ally. The investigation moved with shocking speed. Armed with a warrant, DA Brady's investigators raided the hospital, seizing records and interviewing staff. Sarah, protected by whistleblower laws, gave a full statement, corroborating Maya and Leo's story. Dr. Evans, the chief of medicine, crumbled under pressure and confessed to taking the bribe. The net was closing around Frederick Thorne. The day they brought him in for questioning, Leo insisted on being there. He wanted to see his uncle's face. They sat in an observation room, watching through one-way glass as Thorne sat at the interrogation table, flanked by his lawyers. He was the picture of arrogant confidence, denying everything, calling Leo an unstable, ungrateful delinquent. But as the investigators laid out the evidence, the bank transfers, the phone records, Dr. Evans' confession, the confidence began to crack. His face grew pale, his composure fraying at the edges. The final blow came when they played a recording. A disgruntled former security guard, one of the men who had kidnapped Leo, had secretly recorded Thorne giving him instructions. The voice was unmistakable, cold and ruthless, ordering them to keep the boy quiet permanently if he doesn't cooperate. Thorne's mask of civility shattered completely. He lunged across the table, his face contorted with rage, screaming threats and curses. It was a full confession, born of pure, desperate fury. In the observation room, Leo stood silently, while Maya placed a comforting hand on his arm. It was over. The man who had taken his parents, stolen his childhood, and tried to steal his future was finally brought down. The fight was won. But as Maya looked at Leo's somber face, she knew the scars from this battle would take a long, long time to heal. Months passed. The trial was a media sensation in Crestview. Frederick Thorne was convicted on multiple counts, including kidnapping, conspiracy, and his role in the deaths of Leo's parents years ago. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole, a broken man stripped of his power and prestige. Leo, now in full control of the Vance Corporation, began the arduous task of rebuilding the company and his life. He and Maya had become inseparable. He had insisted she and her new baby, a healthy boy she named Ryan, move into a secure guest house on his family's estate. He was there for every late-night feeding, every milestone. He wasn't just a friend, he was family. He loved Ryan as if he were his own, and his feelings for Maya had deepened into a profound love and respect. But he hesitated to tell her, afraid of overwhelming her, afraid of ruining the precious bond they had built. The climax wasn't in the courtroom, but on a quiet afternoon in the estate's garden. As Maya watched Leo gently rocking a sleeping Ryan, he finally found the courage. He confessed his love for her, not out of gratitude, but because she was the strongest, kindest person he had ever known. He asked her not just to be his wife, but to be his partner in building a new life, a new family, on the ashes of the old one. With tears of joy, Maya accepted. Their wedding was small and private, a celebration of survival and new beginnings. Years later, they would look back on that stormy night, not as a beginning of a nightmare, but as the improbable start of their story. One day, while shopping for Ryan's birthday, they ran into Ethan, Maya's ex. He stood frozen, watching this radiant, confident woman with her wealthy husband and happy child. He saw the life, the love, and the son that could have been his, and the weight of his cowardly choice crushed him. Maya simply smiled, a polite nod to a stranger from a past life, and walked away, holding the hands of her true family. Her act of kindness on that rainy night hadn't just saved a man's life, It had saved her own, leading her to a future brighter than she could have ever dared to dream. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey. If Maya's courage and compassion moved you, please show your support by liking this video, subscribing to our channel, and sharing your thoughts in the comments below. We create these stories for you, and your engagement means the world to us. And let me ask you this: what would you have done if you were in Maya's shoes on that dark, rainy night?